Good morning and happy Saturday from Olive Two Ewe Studio, coming to you live here this morning from Needleworks in Winter Park, Florida. We're Olive Two Ewe Studios. We're here every single Saturday morning at 9:30 in the morning. If you haven't already done so, we invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you get all the notifications and know when we go live, and give us a thumbs up. It really does help, and it doesn't cost you anything at all. Today, we are here to talk about all the knitting advice you can ignore or not. Have you ever thought about that? All the knitting advice you can ignore. We've got some Yarn Ewes here this morning. Good morning, Tish and Deb and Lorianne and Ann. I know everybody's talking about the weather. Tracy's here, Cindy's here, Valera's here, Deborah's here, Katrin's here, Liz is here. All the Yarn Ewes are here. I love, well, not all the Yarn Ewes, but a bunch of Yarn Ewes. So I'm so grateful for that and for you being here this morning. Good morning, Lydia. Yes, it is chilly. I am in my gossamer twist today with a t-shirt underneath it because I'm so cold. Hi, Pam. Good to see you this morning. So we're going to dive right in and talk about all the knitting advice you can ignore or not. My special guest today is Sarina Burhans. She hails to us from Sebring, Florida, which interestingly enough is just right down the road from Lake Wales, Florida, where I grew up. So she's down there in Polk County, and I'm really excited to have her here. So I'm going to bring her on, and we're going to have a little discussion, and then we are going to do all the fun things. We've got more whips and things to get to today, but I want to bring Sarina on right now. Hi, Sarina. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
You're there in the chilly wilds of Sebring, Florida. Is that right?
That's right. We got sweater weather. It's actually getting in 50s and a little bit in the 40s.
I love it. I love it. So you all may know, I've made no secret of it. I have a ghost knitter, and she's not like all transparent and in a white sheet, but Sarina is what I affectionately call my ghost knitter. So she is a professional knitter certified through the Knitting Guild Association. And she's going to talk about that in just a little bit. And we were just talking earlier and the other day about how she has finished a lot of sleeves on sweaters for me. And apparently I'm not the only one that kind of gets caught up in like, okay, I'm done with this now. Don't want to do the sleeves. It reminds me a lot of second sock syndrome. But so Sarina, as I mentioned, is certified through the Knitting Guild Association. She's certified as a professional knitter, but right now she's actually also getting ready to pursue her master certificate. Is that right?
Yeah, it's called Master Hand Knitting.
Those are really different. Can you explain that to us a little bit?
Well, first of all, the Master Hand Knitting's been around since 1987, I believe. So it's been around a long time, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people who have gone through that program. The professional knitting certification, it started, I think, in 2020. So there's only like a handful of professional knitter certified folks who chose to take that. And that's a course. So you do get assigned a mentor and that guides you through the course. Whereas the master hand knitting is individual study.
I see.
So that's a key component is you're really doing it by yourself by researching books and websites and so forth to learn the techniques. And you also have to write with the master hand knitting, and that's professional writing that requires citations. So it's a whole going back to school.
It's a rigorous process. I'll make sure the link for the Knitting Guild Association is not yet in the show notes, but I'll make sure to put it in the show notes so that everybody has access to that. And then also I want to mention Sarina's email is in the show notes, as well as her handle for Ravelry and Instagram. So if you're interested in reaching out to her about doing a little ghost knitting for you, her schedule's kind of full, but you never know. She might have an opening. She's happy to take those emails, and you can follow her on Instagram. And then on Ravelry, I was perusing your library last night. You've got a lot of objects on Ravelry, so it's fun to see all the things that you've been knitting on. So I want to start by saying, here's the thing. There's no knitting police and there's no crochet police, except the people that you sit and knit and crochet with, and they will sometimes happily be your police. Is that right?
Well, I think we're our own worst critic, usually knitters, I find. We're very critical of our own work.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And the advice that we're going to talk about what you can ignore or not, just depending, we're going to jump into it in just a second, all comes down to your personal tolerance. It all comes down to what you choose to abide by or what you choose to ignore, and ultimately your own tolerance for mistakes or more ill-fitting garments that don't fit as well as they could, or size modifications and that sort of thing. Your tolerance for that is what it ultimately comes down to. So, but we're
Right.
chatting, and we have a few little differences about how we believe, but everybody knows that I'm a loosey-goosey knitter from the beginning. So the first thing I want to jump off with is patterns. So are you a really diehard pattern follower? You know, everybody's going to tell you, well, you want to follow the pattern. If you like the way it looked, you want to follow the pattern. So, you know, but you can ignore that because you can be more creative if you want to do that and go a little bit off road. And before Sarina jumps in with her opinion, because I know she's got one, which is good for us, I want to direct you to the community tab here on YouTube. There's a poll there, and I want to know what you think about how you feel about pattern following. So if you click that community tab, there should be a poll and you can register your vote there. So Sarina, how do you feel about following a pattern?
Well, of course, I have to follow a pattern because it's usually for work. But personally, I think the most thing I stray from is using different yarn. I really think it's neat to see all of the different yarns people choose to use, because sometimes the yarn may not be available or might not be in your price range. So I love Ravelry's notes from folks. So thank you if you've ever put your notes in there so I can find out if you like the yarn you chose.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing that I think. And then the other is fit. I mean, some people really need some short rows for bust. Some people don't care. Some people really need short rows for their shoulder. And if you always do that on your garments, why not do it for the pattern, even if it doesn't call for it?
So you can go a little off-road and add in the features that actually fit your body type. And certainly if you're knitting your first garment, your first sweater, you're not going to know that yet. But as time goes on and you knit subsequent patterns, then you know how to alter them. If you want to bring in the waist a little bit, or as Sarina mentioned, do some changes for your shoulders. I was talking to a friend the other day, another Yarn of You, about how I've got sweaters that the necks don't fit on me properly because I have narrow shoulders. I'm not a small person, but my shoulders are narrow. And so I probably need to learn how to modify a pattern. I like the basic design, but modify it, break the rule, modify it to fit my body right. So that makes good
sense. And
I
think length is one that is commonly decided by the knitter, because we might want it at waist level or much lower. So I think a lot of people do modify that, or maybe sleeve length. And why not?
Yeah. I've seen people in groups, though, interestingly enough, who come back with their finished object and it doesn't really fit them well. Looks just like the picture. And people will say, well, you could have changed it. But sometimes, especially newer knitters, are a little less comfortable with making those modifications. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where you have somebody who's been knitting 100 years. I speak in hyperbole a lot. And, you know, they start out with something and it ends up looking totally different than the pattern because they kind of go off-road and get super creative and they make it their own. And that's okay too. So you can absolutely break the rule of following the pattern every time within certain confines, I think. Okay. The next one has been a topic of conversation in the Yarn of Use and on this podcast for years, because everybody knows I don't like to gauge swatch for sweaters. So the common advice is you always, always, always gauge swatch, period. End of story. How do you feel about that, Sarina?
Well, I definitely don't think that's true. I had mentioned to you before that if you've been knitting for many, many years and you're very successful and happy with your results and you've never swatched, just have fun. I mean, it's your hobby, it's your choice. But if you're a new knitter, I would very much encourage you to start a good habit of swatching, because when you buy a beautiful yarn like your yarn, it deserves a swatch, and it deserves not to be thrown across the room because you're frustrated with it. You can throw the acrylic across the room, but please don't get mad at your yarn you used yarn. And go ahead and take that extra effort to swatch. But of course, you have scarves and shawls and hats that are not as critical about swatching.
Definitely. So I break the rules all the time when it comes to swatching. I certainly feel more comfortable doing that when it is like a shawl or a hat or something along those lines, for sure. Because a hat's a little different, but a shawl, if it ends up a little bigger or a little smaller, it's not usually the end of the world. You don't want to end up with a shawl sized for an elephant. That could be problematic. Then we call it a blanket, though. So you can change it because there are design elements to that, but swatching is important. Now, I will say I have enjoyed some sweaters where you can actually, if you start the sweater at the neck, just after you keep going, you can kind of get an idea of your gauge there. So it's not like a wasted swatch. But a lot of people will actually do a gauge swatch and then pull it, measure it, pull it out, wrap it, and start using it again, so it's not wasted yarn. And then you've got other people who actually gauge swatch and will frame their swatches, and it makes really nice decor for your knitting room, right?
Oh, definitely.
I love it. So there are reasons to gauge swatch, but I know that I'm not alone in the yarn I use. I'm not going to call anybody out, but I know I'm not alone when there are people who are like, no, I never gauge swatch. I will say, for me, that's a personal choice. It goes back to that tolerance. I have a sweater that I don't get to wear very often because unless I'm in my skinny era, which doesn't happen very often, it just doesn't fit right. It just doesn't. And every time I look at that sweater, I think, yeah, I could wear that either if I lose 50 pounds again or if I had just done a gauge swatch. So,
and the hard part is often we're not using the recommended yarn. And that's where swatching can be very important to get the results you want. And of course, I'm talking garments because that's mostly what I do. And then if you're knitting for somebody else, and another hard part is getting their measurements. Some people don't like to have their measurements done. But how are you going to make sure you get a right sleeve length or what have you? My daughter wanted a poncho, but she wanted it a specific length. She's like, that one's too long. So even something as simple as a poncho, it may not be attractive to somebody if it's not done in certain dimensions.
Right. Yeah, that makes good sense. So gauge swatching, I'm wondering, sometimes doing things that you don't like to do all comes down to reframing it. So I've said, I've called DPN sticks of the devil. I've called gauge swatching, like I just can't do it. But maybe we need to play a little game with our head to reframe it, to make it something that we want to do so that we're not so resistant to it, perhaps. But you don't have to swatch. There are times that you can get away with it, like Sarina said, on shawls or things like that don't have specific measurements that have to fit. And if you're okay with calling your shawl a blanket at some point, if it becomes too large. Now, the next thing is blocking. And that is another one that is very, very divisive about how people feel about blocking. I think most things should be blocked, but I think you can break that advice if you're doing socks, perhaps, or something like that. But I think there's a time and a place. If you're doing lace, you're not going to get the full effect of it, I think, unless you block. So, Sarina, I want you to weigh in on this and tell me all the ways I'm wrong.
Well, one thing that's so funny is that I'm a fairly new knitter. So when I took the professional knitting course, it requires blocking to be very specific. And so I thought everything had to be blocked that way. And I finally realized I can steam this sweater. I don't have to be that picky. And it might look just beautiful if I just run a steam iron closely near the fabric, don't touch the fabric, and it works wonderfully. And talk about a time saver rather than the water immersion, which I had been taught to do for everything, or I thought I had to do it for everything. So it can make a difference to relax those rules a little bit and try a different way.
Right. That makes sense. So if something needs a specific measurement, if you need to block it to a specific measurement, then maybe it's important to do. But if it's something that is not necessary to do that, then you can break that rule too, right? Not everything.
Right.
But you block things because of you're doing it in a professional role. I have to say, I'm always grateful. I never expected you to steam or block my sweaters, but you usually send them back steamed. And I'm like, oh, wait, okay, I can just put it on.
Well, it's too difficult for me to not see what it's really going to look like when it's done. And we all know that blocking transforms it. Oh my gosh. The yarn just blooms, and if you're knitting maybe has some gaps, it fills in those gaps. Yarn is really magical. Well, I'm talking mostly about natural fibers,
Right.
of course. It's just a pleasure to see it change like that and become just flexible. I just finished this mitten, and my gosh, it was hugely different in the feel of it. It felt so stiff and uncomfortable until I blocked it. And I'm shocked at how lovely the fabric feels after blocking.
It always seems to kind of polish up the fiber to me, the yarn. It always looks so much more finished and polished when that happens. But I've done it right here on the podcast where I finish something just in time to throw it on for the podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to put that on the way it is. And
well, as a new knitter, you shouldn't panic either. I know that's what I did in the beginning. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is turning out horrible. My knitting must be horrible. But it's not necessarily, because color work looks like crap while you're knitting it, because those strands behind the scenes are pulling things in, and you're like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And you have to, so doing the very beginning, the swatching, all the way to the blocking and seaming, it can really have a polished look to your work.
Absolutely. So it goes back to that, where your tolerance is, what the point of the item is, and how much you want it to look a certain way. If it's I'm gonna quote a Yarn You again. I've quoted her a lot. If it's a sock in a shoe under a pair of pants, maybe not so much. Just put those on your feet and move on with your life, maybe. So you can absolutely break the advice in that situation. But if it's a lacy sock and you want to show it off, then maybe you should consider that advice and go ahead.
It really is common sense, isn't it? I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So you have some margin and some leeway. Okay. You kind of foreshadowed this a little bit a minute ago, mixing fibers in projects. Now there's a couple ways. The way you were talking about is if a pattern calls for a certain type of yarn or a certain type of fiber, maybe you substitute something. And in that case, it is important to gauge swatch so that you make sure that you're going to get the same gauge. But what about mixing fibers in projects? I've done it. I've known other people who have done it. In other words, maybe I start out doing, like, maybe my contrast yarn for a color is a different fiber composition than my main, but they're the same weight. And we do that all the time. And we tell people they can do it because I've done it myself. So how do you feel about that? Some people are like purists, they don't.
Yeah, some of my favorite patterns that I haven't done yet are, I think, not only different fibers, but maybe different weights. They have like a worsted stripe and then a lace, like cashmere or Angora stripe. And I'd love to do one of those to see how they adjusted the stitch count, if they did between those. But the effect is stunning. You know, a smooth fiber and a fuzzy, and a smooth and a fuzzy. There's so many things that can be done with that. I like the idea, but I haven't done it too much myself. I haven't gone experimental.
Yeah. Well, and there's a difference between when the pattern specifically calls for that, like the pattern was written for the purpose of mixing fibers, or when you just decide to go a little off road and do it your own way, because that's what you have. A lot of times we're trying to stash bust and pull out things that we have, and that sometimes is the way to do it. Yeah, Lydia says mixing fibers makes your resulting fabric so much more interesting. And it can, but it comes down to what's the point of the item? Is it a garment? And is that going to affect your gauge and all of those sorts of things? But it can absolutely result in a super interesting fabric, I think. So
I
you
think
can.
the trend about ripped jeans is kind of an example. It's like solid fabric and strands. I mean, you could do that with knitting, get crazy with it.
I love it. So combining kind of the going off road with the pattern, mixing up your yarn. And, that's again, the thing that I think so many knitters, especially newer knitters or people who knit very casually, who don't have a lot of time to knit as a regular rule, I think we forget that it sticks and string. Like if you don't like it, you can just pull it out. It's not something that's, you haven't paid millions of dollars. Even if it's good hand-dyed yarn that you've invested in, it still sticks and string. And you can absolutely do that multiple times to no detriment. So it's okay to give yourself permission to kind of be creative and go off road and try something. And if you don't like it, you back up. I've told that to many of our Yarny users and customers. They're like, well, I really like these two yarns. Can I use these? I'm like, absolutely you can. Whether you're going to love it or not is a whole nother issue. But once you start stitching it up, either knit or crochet, you start stitching it up. If you get through those first rows, and if you're like, I'm not so sure about that, pull it out and start again, because it all goes back to frogging. I mean, we like to knit, right? So it's not a failure to have to re-knit as a general rule, I think. Makes sense.
I re-knit all the time. In fact, the way I weave in my yarn tails, I try to be consistent because that way I can pull it out easier. So I know how I weave in my yarn tails. I know about how long they probably will be. And that makes it easier if I want to redo that garment.
That's nice. Or I've heard some people weave in extra long tails so that if they end up with a defect in it, they can use that yarn then to then fix it later, which is another, basically what you're saying, which is important. Deb has a really important point. It's also knowing fiber qualities: drapey alpaca, slippery smooth Chinese silk, stretchy cotton, springy wool, and how they'll behave in a fabric, for sure.
I think that's an excellent point because it also impacts care. Of course, we default probably to hand washing, but you do want to know what's going to happen and how we have to take care of that in the future.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point that you bring up. We default to hand washing. So that is a rule that a lot of knitters say. If you have your yarn, then you're going to hand wash, lay flat to dry. I mean, I have a mug somewhere here with sheep that says lay flat to dry, right? So that's kind of a rule. And I've broken that rule. My socks don't get hand washed.
Oh, no, mine don't either. But I do try to put them in a laundry bag so they won't snag.
That's
no, I just throw those things in there.
I mean, socks. I mean, who's got time to hand wash socks? I have seen, though, like on Instagram and other platforms, sock knitters who say, okay, it's sock washing day, and they literally have piles and they hand wash them. I totally respect that kind of dedication, but I don't have time for that in my life. So they definitely go in the washer. And I've been known to put some of my beautifully basic tees on gentle in the washer, and I've put them in the dryer when they've been too big and just watched them and tried to make sure that they didn't shrink too much. So I'm definitely a rule breaker. I think because of what
you do. As long as you're willing to take that risk. I have completely felted a sweater, my first one, that was expensive yarn, and I don't know what I was thinking. But I did, and but it will become a really nice project bag one of these days.
There you go. There's nothing wrong with that.
It happens.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, another rule we hear a lot of times, we all know yarn snobs. Many of us may be yarn snobs, but there's kind of that advice and rule that expensive yarn is always better. And I don't believe that's true. I think you can break that advice all day long. What do you think, Sarina?
Oh, definitely, because there's charity knitting that requires acrylic, and I just did some of that for the Knitting Guild Association. There are baby blankets and blankets in general that probably would be better served with something that's not so fancy. And plus, it's way too expensive. If you want to make a baby blanket for a family member, you don't want that to be a $200 baby blanket. Most of us, maybe some of you, but yeah, it definitely. And toys. I do make occasionally toys or softies, as we call them, and I wouldn't want to use too much expensive yarn on that. The trolls are really gnomes. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Are getting so popular. Oh my gosh. So yeah, there's a reason to have acrylic.
And I think when it comes down to baby blankets and toys for infants, that sort of thing, I don't know any mother of a newborn who has time to hand wash a baby blanket. And if you have a baby, it's going to get all kinds of stuff on it that we won't talk about. And so it needs to be washed frequently. And so it all comes down to that common sense piece, but you can absolutely break that advice and use whatever yarn fits the purpose and the function of what it is that you're creating. So yarn snobs are not around you. There's a time for really nice, great yarn, and there's a time for something that is just really much more of a workhorse, I think.
I love the people who are yarn snobs, though, and have a big collection. I want to be invited to their home.
Or in their will.
I just love how much they have and how they organize it. And it's just part of the fun to them.
Yeah, I agree. So there are two pieces of advice that I say you absolutely 100% should always follow, or two guidelines that really I don't think you should break. Are you ready for these? So number one, you can never have too much yarn. You can never have too much yarn. Follow that advice all the time. And I'll tell you, that's kind of okay, wink, wink, nod, nod. Michelle sells yarn. Yeah, okay, I do. But the other piece is you never know when you need a gift. You never know when you need to make something quickly. And having that stash that you were talking about, Sarina, can really serve you well. And you have a chance then when you have yarn in front of you to pick and choose and select fibers that make sense for what you're doing. And I think that having that stash can inspire you to go a little off-road, be a little bit creative, and do something different. If you're just looking at yarn on a screen, then I think it's harder because we want to pick things up and be tactile and be like, how would these feel together? I can't do that if it's on a screen. But if I found a yarn that I loved and I've ordered it and it's in my stash, then that's going to serve me well. So apart from the wink, wink, nod, nod, Michelle sells yarn and wants us to buy all the yarn. Yes, that's true. But it's because it serves us well as makers, I think.
Oh, definitely. And plus, there's sales. So why not take advantage of great sales? And I love to support local businesses, my local yarn shops, or the festivals I attend by buying a little something from them. So it's really good all around. And plus, my gosh, the endorphins.
Yeah.
Buying that beautiful yarn, isn't that worth it?
It is.
Make your day special.
It is. So Marley Bird, who is another creator and designer, I read a blog post that she wrote one time, and she was talking about how buy what you love, because a hank of yarn that you love, if you never stitch it up, if you never knit it or crochet it or stitch it up in any way, it is still a work of art on your shelf. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's an artisanal product, and you're looking at somebody's creativity and time, and you can appreciate that for what it looks like. So, buy what you love. If there's a use for it down the road, that's great. If not, enjoy it for just the mere eye candy aspect of it. So I think that's okay to do. So the second piece of advice, I think that it's not really a piece of advice so much as kind of a guideline. If you have to frog, it's not failure. We talked about that. And, we like to knit, but it's easy to fall into that idea that, oh, I've got to rip it out. I've got to frog it. I got to rip it. But that's not a failure. And interestingly, Sarina, you were talking about that just before we came on live.
Oh, yes. When I was a fairly new knitter, I knit a bunch of things that I am dissatisfied with now. And I will redo every one of those sweaters. And so that's on my to-do list, is to redo those sweaters. Now, it's a little extra work because you do need to re-soak that yarn and let it dry and all that good stuff. And it changes it a bit, but who cares? It's my sweater.
Exactly. It's your sweater and your tolerance for that. And how much better if it changes the yarn a little bit, it's still not what it was to begin with. So it's still on the path to being more like what you wanted it to be. So
yeah, I am so accepting of all the aspects of knitting now, from the swatching to the blocking to the frogging. I am very comfortable with it all. And so you can, where it doesn't make you frustrated or feel like a failure. It's part of the whole love of knitting.
Yeah. The whole process, for sure. And just think, you get to touch your yarn more when you're knitting with it more. You get to experience the fiber and enjoy the process. And I think that's all really important. So it really does. Yes, there's knitting advice you can absolutely ignore. My tolerance for doing that is higher than probably Sarina's. I know some other Yarn Yous are right there with me on that. And then, you've got multiple camps. Some people are like, always follow the pattern, always do this, always use the fiber, and then other people are off road. But I think it's worth it to kind of reflect and consider where you are, and consider if maybe you could go off road a little bit, and how would that be a manifestation of your own creativity, and see what you like. Because in the end, if you don't like it, you can rip it out, and it's really just sticks and string. So yeah. I think this was fun, Sarina. It's so much fun to get your take on it. I have told you, and I've told the Yarn Yous, how grateful I am for you, because I'm sending her my Wednesday sweater because I've been so busy lately. I haven't been able to get a really good start, and I'm grateful that I know that she's there. And she knows of my arm issues and all that, and she always does what she can to kind of go a little off road and modify it for me, because she knows me now. And that is wonderful. So what do you see in your future, Sarina, with your knitting?
Oh gosh, well, I'm very blessed to have quite a few steady customers now, and so that I don't get to do as much personal knitting right now. I am lucky to do a couple personal projects because I don't have too many customers going on right now. But I'm going to work through this master hand knitting program, which could take 3 or 4 years. So it does take a long time. It took me about 2 years to do the professional one, and learn. Oh, I love it. It's just so fun to learn.
How
Keeps
fun.
us young.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you retired, or just at a different stage in your life, or?
Yes, I worked for about 28 years, and then when we moved to Florida, I ended up being retired. Wasn't sure that would happen, but here I am, and I'm just a part-time knitter now. I never thought I'd work in the industry, but I'm loving working in the industry as well. So that's what I am. I'm traveling a little bit, knitting most of the time, and I dog sit a little bit for local people, which gets me my dog fix.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, I'm so grateful to you. So glad that you're here. And as a reminder, I'll make sure in the show notes that we have the Knitting Guild Association link if any of you are interested in learning a little bit about the programs that they offer, or maybe going ahead and doing that. And then Sarina's handles are in the show notes right now, so you can follow her. And then her email address is there also. So if you too think you might need a ghost knitter, Sarina can look at her schedule and see if she's got time for you. Any parting thoughts, Sarina?
Oh, I just appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you. It's just really neat to support a strong woman-owned business here in Florida. I love that, and I want to support small business owners.
Well, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for being here with me on a Saturday morning and for all the things that you do. So grateful for you, and hope to keep seeing you in the Yarn Use, okay?
I will.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Isn't she great? I love Sarina. She helps me so much and gives me confidence to keep doing the things that I do. All right, we're going to get to whips in just a little bit, but I want to talk about Scotland for just a moment because people are sending their deposits in and making that happen. I saw Judy sneak in here. Hi, Judy. Diana's here as well. So I want to say hi to you folks. Thanks for being here. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and click that community tab and take part in that poll. I'm curious to see what you think about going kind of off-road with your patterns, or if you're a stable rule keeper. Interesting stuff. But I want to talk about Scotland. So finally, I promised you it would happen in the next few days, and it did. It happened yesterday. We got all the details from the tour company about Scotland. I was able to get it out there really quickly. I wanted to get it out there before Thanksgiving, so that it would be available to you. It's shaping up to be a great trip. So it is similar. The itinerary is similar to the itinerary we did last time, but we are doing some different things. We're actually going to spend one night in Glasgow because we're going to be going to a yarn shop there and doing a yarn dyeing workshop when you're going to walk out with like 200 grams of yarn that you've dyed. We're also planning to do a really neat stitching workshop at Dovecot Studios there in Edinburgh using tweeds and tartans, which is super exciting. There's so many things planned for this, some needle felting we're working on in Dumfries, and some really cool things. So all the fiber, but plenty of time to do some stitching. And there's also plenty to keep the guys involved. I know the guys always talk about doing their kind of pub crawls, and there'll be time for them to do that. So especially when we're in Edinburgh, that really lends itself well to that once we hit Edinburgh. So the dates of that, you're going to leave the US on September 21st, and you're going to leave the UK and get back on October 2nd. So pretty much the same amount of time as we've done before. And it's going to be a fantastic trip. If you've sent me your deposit, fabulous. I know some of you are actually sending it to me by mail, which is wonderful. If you want to write a check for that deposit, or you can go online, read about it, and go ahead and make your deposit online. And many people are already doing that. We do limit the space because we don't want it to get too big. And we're in they're putting us in a coach this time again that is, in their mind, small enough to make that turn at our Dollinish, which just always makes me crack up. But that's what they're doing. And so it'll be the same size coach, I believe, as we were in last time, which there's plenty of room on it. And so I don't like to fill it up because I like everybody to have some room to spread out a little bit. So because this happened just before Thanksgiving and I'm leaving on Tuesday for Thanksgiving, I'm asking you to give me 2 weeks to get the terms and conditions out to you once you make your deposit. Your deposit holds it. It's fully refundable. At this point, you're going to have plenty of time once you get the terms and conditions to be in that fully refundable state. So if you'll give me 2 weeks to get that out to you, then you'll have all the terms and conditions. I'll be putting up the listing soon for travel insurance. That is highly recommended, but not mandatory. That way you're covered for lots of possible things that can happen. So your trip and investment is covered. So I'll put that link up as well so that you can take care of that at your leisure, but there is a time frame for that. And I'll explain it. You're all good right now. So I know we've got some repeat travelers and we've got some new travelers coming. So that's a great mix. It's always a lot of fun. Of course, there's going to be yarn, going to have a pattern for you, and all the fun swag. Lots of great swag on the trip. I hope the travelers have felt like the swag has been good. I think it's been pretty good. So definitely swag and lots of fun things happening. And I went ahead and created the private Facebook group. So if you've already paid your deposit, unless you've just done it in the last couple of hours, you should have an invite to that Facebook group. If you don't have an invite, either through email or on Facebook, let me know, and I will be sure that you are able to get in the Facebook group. That's just where we share tips and tricks and information, as all the official information is shared through emails so that nobody misses it, because occasionally we have somebody who's not really active on Facebook. So, but we share lots of information. Some of it's funny, some of it's just videos we find about places we may be visiting and that sort of thing. And some of it, as we get down to it, is like about suitcases and, you know, all the little details. I've about decided that I'm going to start bringing a stash of suitcases, because everybody always ends up having to buy an extra suitcase and they're running around like crazy trying to find the right one. But we'll talk. I've got some ideas about that to hopefully make that a little easier for this particular trip and going forward. So I'll be sharing those ideas as well. I will say, if you're traveling to Scotland and you're in the Facebook group, if you have like logistical questions or like serious questions, not that questions aren't serious, but if you have, you know, logistical questions or questions about the money or anything like that, please email me those questions at Michelle@Olive2U instead. I may not see everything on social media, and I want to make sure that I get your questions answered. And so I don't want to run the risk of missing that at all. I always want to make sure that I respond to your questions in a timely manner so that you get the information that you need. The tour company is CIE Tours. Excuse me, just a minute here. Talking a lot, of course. The tour company is CIE Tours. They do a fantastic job. They're really happy to have the Yarn Use back. And word on the street, I can't 100% guarantee it because you never know what might go awry. Laura Rhodes was our tour guide last time. She was absolutely phenomenal. If you talk to any of the Yarn Use that traveled with us this last time, everybody loved Laura, and she's blocked out the time. And the plan is that she's going to be our tour guide this time. I know many of you have asked me about Andy, the driver. We're going to see what we can do, but we can't guarantee it. So Andy was awesome as well. So lots of fun happening, and we're really excited. There are several meals included. We're going to be at Kitchen Coos and Use again with the Highland Coos. We're going to do the hands-on tour, which was just a fluke last time that we got that. But we've booked the hands-on tour this time, as well as that delightful, they call it a cream tea, but it's an afternoon tea at Kitchen Coos and Use, and all kinds of fun stuff happening there. So get your deposit in. I'm super excited. You've got plenty of time. I broke the payments up this time. You've got your deposit, and then you've got 3 payments instead of 2 to make it much easier to plan for and to kind of manage the payment. So you've got 3 payment opportunities instead of 2, so a little less of a chunk each time, which makes it more accessible and more affordable, I hope. So yay for Scotland. If you're going to Scotland, get your graphic. You should have been able to download the graphic when you paid your deposit. Put it up on social media. Let everybody know that you're going to Scotland. I know not everybody does that, and that's okay. So real quick, let's go ahead and get to WIPs. I don't want to run out of time. We've got slow stitching happening here at Needleworks today, both streamed and in person. So we're being a little careful about time, but let's see what you guys are working on, because I'm here to tell you there's some really cool things that everybody's stitching on in the Yarn Use. All right, let's start up here. We've got Jamie Laurent. She said she finished the body, got me a sweater vest or onto the arms. So that's just what we were talking about with Sarina. It's all about those sleeves. It's all about the sleeves. So good job, Jamie. I'm thinking that might be the September. I'm sorry, I keep saying it's September Wednesday sweater, but I'm not 100% sure. So let us know in the comments. Rachel has got Quindici in melon, and she's getting closer to the end. She was starting section 8 when she was working on that, and it looks really good. I love, love, love that color combination. Sabrina, she finished her color work and split for the sleeves. That looks like a Jen Stein gas pattern to me, but I'm not sure which one it is. but I love her color choices. Look how that just absolutely pops. Love that color choice. Next up, Nancy Victorino is using Chesterton. She's doing the treble beanie, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the designer's name. I suspect she's Japanese, and I don't want to butcher it, but that is beautiful. She says, who's up for yarn chicken later? Because she used 90 yards last time. Chesterton has 73. So I think she's kind of holding her breath on that. I have to show these socks. Marjorie Moulet knit these. You may have seen the other photo in the Yarny Use where she was actually reclining on the sidewalk, but seen in the wild. Hard Candy Christmas on socks, and those look fully ribbed. They look absolutely great. Love them, love them, love them. I think I've got some more Hard Candy Christmas on fingering weight coming my way, so let me know if you're interested in that. We ran out. Lydia, she said, oh, Lydia, you're so funny. Hoping it'll fit my big head because gauge swatching is just a suggestion at this house. That's just what we were talking about. That's the shroom pattern. She's using Chesterton in slate. And she said it did, in fact, fit. So that's awesome. All right, Carol Burdett. She has completed the 2024 Yarn Challenge. She's in good company. There's only a couple people that I'm aware of who have finished that. I'm working on putting together that prize pack, and at the end of the year, we'll be doing the drawing. Anybody who finishes the 2024 Yarn Challenge will be in that drawing, and it's going to be pretty prodigious, if I do say so myself. And she's got all the information there about the patterns and all the things, and you can see all the stuff that she worked on. How awesome is that? Congratulations, Carol. It looks great. Here's Marjorie Moulet again. She's showing how you can absolutely kind of interchange colorways and all kinds of things. This was a shirt that she did, a blouse, and she calls it going against the gauge because she changes things up with needles and all sorts of things. She's definitely an off-road knitter. Looks great. Cheryl was at our following retreat, and we did the autumn doodle pattern, kind of a gateway drug to the doodle decks. And it looks so good. Cheryl finished hers up after she got home. She was a little uncertain at the retreat about that green. I loved it, and I encouraged her to keep with it. And I'm glad she did. I hope she loves it as much as I do. I think that green really, really pops. And then here we go. Here is Holly Parker. She finished up her November, her Necroni Swimo sweater. Aigo is the designer. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right. The pattern is the knobby slipover, and she used Love Hurts and Homer, and it looks great, Holly. Great, great job. Holly's also a brand new circular sock machine user, but I have to tell you, last I looked, she was knitting up all the socks on her circular sock machine, and it looked absolutely fantastic. She's doing all the socks, and it looks super, super good. So I'm going to roll through really quickly some new yarn we have in the shop. It's all in your newsletter this week. Really excited about it. So this is the sea glass that everybody's loving. It's very similar to what I'm wearing, but my Wednesday sweater is being knit up in this on a larger gauge. Love it. Those high def speckles. You can check out on the channel. There is a legit, like, formal shop update sort of video. I'm going live in the Yarny Use more during the week, doing more shop update stuff there, but then I'm always posting it to YouTube so you can be sure and find it there as well. This is Melanie, and this is a gorgeous colorway also. This is actually, I'm trying to think, maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to misspeak. We've got some yarn that's going to be showing up in Tandem in their spring issue, and I can't remember if Melanie was one of them. We might have traded it out for something else, but look at Melanie. It's beautiful. This is part of the Lonesome Pine Gone with the Wind collection. So there's Rhett, there's Melanie, all the names from Gone with the Wind, and Melanie is one of them that I love so much. And then Maple's Gap was the first yarn that I saw from Lonesome Pine that I absolutely just swooned over. Maple's Gap is beautiful. It's a great transitional colorway, but it also works really well for winter. And it's got some pinks and plums in there. I challenge you to put that together with some of our purple colors, like our plummy colors, or some of our darker pinks. I think it would look great. And there is a pattern that I've shown on other podcasts and linked to in the show notes for Maples Gap, but it makes pretty socks and all sorts of things. We've got it on Play-Doh as well. Many of these are available on multiple weights. So just typically show you one. And then Fallen Leaves, I put a thing on Facebook so you can see how this knits up. It is beautiful, and there's only a small amount of it. Fallen Leaves, I love it because it really does evoke the colors of fall. And I am particularly fond, you've heard me say it, I think, on the formal shop update, particularly fond of how this color juxtaposes next to those orange colors. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. So Fallen Leaves, and there's an example on Facebook of how it stitches up. We're trying to provide more of those examples so you can see exactly how that works out, because we've got sock crankers in the house now. So it's quicker and easier to provide samples to you so you can see how yarns knit up. I'm still getting, I keep threatening to do it, and I'm going to do it. I have taught a workshop called Fiberistas Guild to the Universe of Hand-Dyed Yarns. And I keep threatening to do it, both streaming and or write a mini book about it. And it's still on my to-do list. I just haven't had time. But this is a great yarn to use as an example, because it's all about how you open up the hank and read the repeats. And there's a way to do that with some accuracy. It's more of an educated guess because it depends on gauge. Oh gosh, did I just say that gauge word again? Depends on gauge and what your application is, if you're doing it flat or you're doing it in the round and those sorts of things. But this kind of gives you a pseudo stripy effect if you're doing it in the round, like say socks or things along those lines. So super, super beautiful stuff. We've got new bags and stitch markers in the shop. You may have seen these. I'm particularly fond of these little stitch markers with the sheep in sweaters. This is all from Emma Ball. We import this from the UK, as well as the little Notions pouches. Look at the little coos. How cute are the coos? We also have the coos. I think there's only one of these left. I could be wrong. The drawstring bag with the coos. I love it. It's also got this handy little handle right here. And these are super affordable, and they're really large bags. I think they could hold a sweater's quantity. And then you've got sheep in hats here that kind of match the stitch markers I showed as well. And there's more stitch markers. There's more things. If you click the link in your newsletter, you'll see all of these, but they're going really quickly. I think that's the last coup bag. I could be wrong, but I think it is. But I just love, love, love those cute little stitch markers. So a couple of things I want to mention really quick while you're here. You've noticed that the channel's changing up a little bit with the podcast. I'm doing much more with guests. I can't guarantee I'll have a guest every week, but I am busy booking guests for topics that I think we'll all enjoy, and it just makes it more fun, I think. There is the community tab now with that poll today, and I plan to put a little more content there and a little more fun stuff there. And now we have a shop link as well, where you can, if you look down below, you should see some of the products that I'm talking about available to you. So you can click right here on YouTube and go to purchase those products. So I'm learning how to use those features, but they're really, really great. And the channel is booming. We've got a lot more subscribers just recently. So I really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and please share it with your friends. Hey, here's a really fun podcast to watch. I hope it's fun. I'm working to make it more fun all the time here. So I do want to mention I'll be in New Hampshire this week. I'll be available by email, but I won't be as quick to it possibly. And next Saturday, I'm not yet sure what that's going to look like, to be honest with you. I don't know if I'm going to go live, or maybe I'll pre-record something, or maybe there won't be anything. If I know me, I'll have something up. But I really hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. But I am going to take a little bit of time for my family. We're actually flying up to Boston and staying one night in Salem, Massachusetts. I've never been there, at a little B&B right down in the downtown area for one night, and then driving up to New Hampshire. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I appreciate your grace, but do reach out to me if there's anything at all I can do. And then in December, I'm going to meeting up with Sherry and Terry from Lonesome Pine, who are dyeing now exclusively for Olive Two Ewe Studios and getting a whole lot more yarn in the shop. Let me also mention, we do have the ability to do special orders. I've had several special orders placed. So if there are colorways of theirs that you love, or you need, we've even formulated some stuff for some customers. If there's some stuff that you need, let me know what base you need it on, and we'll get a special order set up for you. Absolutely. But we're looking forward to January, having some collections in the shop to make it that much easier for you to shop. Also keep in mind, the Fiberside chats are back. It's Alexandra Davidoff, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She's going to be talking about 3D knitted dragon scales, which seems like a very niche item, but I'm a little intrigued. I think that's interesting. So it's always good time when people get together at the Fiberside chats. The link is in your newsletter, so you want to make sure and get signed up for that. Please select Olive Two Ewe Studios as your local yarn shop for that. It'll be recorded, sent out to you if you're not able to watch live, and then you generally have about a week to follow that, to watch it, so that you can get all the information that you need there. I love Fiberside chats. It's really, really cool. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for your support, and having you all show up just means the world to me. We've got more things coming up for the Yarn Use in the new year, including our January Solely Socks event here at Needleworks, which is going to be circular sock machines and hand knitted socks. That self-striping yarn will be here in January. I can't wait. And we're going to have a sock bar with that. And it'll be available online as well. So all kinds, and maybe some classes during Solely Socks as well. So all kinds of fun stuff happening here. Thank you so much for your support and all that you do. Please, as usual, let me know if I can help in any way. Get your Scotland deposits in, and just know how much I appreciate you. Again, we're Olive Two Ewe Studios. We're here every single Saturday morning at 9:30 in the morning. I'll let you know if I won't be here next week, but something will probably be here at 9:30 in the morning next week. And yeah, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and give us a thumbs up. It means the world to us. All right, everybody, have a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. Thanks again. See you soon in the Yarn Use. Bye-bye.